Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Alissa. We're going to continue our spending discussion with Courtney Moriarty. She's a wealth analyst here at Schneider Wealth Management. But today we're going to focus specifically on education planning. How are you today, Courtney?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So education planning is very important. It can be a very large expense, as you and I both know. So whether, for children or grandchildren, but before we even plan for the cost of education, I think conversations need to be had by parents, grandparents about the payment source. So, we might have some people, you might have one spouse, right, that wants to fully pay for their kids' college, while maybe the other one thinks they need to have a little skin in the game. So I think, that's where we tend to start, is just a conversation about what are people's beliefs and values around education spending, and then how can we kind of meet in the middle and create a plan from there. So can you talk about the two most common education savings vehicles? We have 529 plans and UTMA accounts that are typically used, and how are they similar? How are they different?
Yeah, so I'll start with the similarities. So they both have the same annual contribution amount as the gift tax exemption. So it's going to be $17,000 for single filers and $34,000 for joint filers. And then we can get more into this piece later, but both can affect how much government aid you get from FAFSA. 529s will affect it a little less than an UTMA would, but they both can have an impact on how much government aid you get. There are quite a few differences. So a 529 can be used only really for education purposes. And that makes it tax-free. So when you contribute to it, it'll grow tax-free, and then the withdrawals will come out tax-free. But an UTMA is used for anything that benefits the minor. So it's not specifically prohibited to just educational expenses. And then the 529 is treated as an asset of the parent, regardless of the child's age. But the UTMA is considered an asset of the child. So it'll be under the child's control. It'll transfer to the child between the ages of 18 and 25, depending on what state you live in. So the 529 also allows you to change the beneficiary if the current beneficiary on it doesn't plan to use all of the funds. So, for example, if your child is not planning to go to college, or if it's going to be a lot cheaper than what's in the 529, you can always change the beneficiary on it and use it for another child. And then another difference is the 529 has less investment options than the UTMA. So in UTMA, you can include even tangible assets or property in it if you want, but a 529 is limited to mostly mutual funds.
Several years ago, they made a new rule too for 529s that you can use $10,000 a year for K through 12 private education as well. So that's another way, if you are able to contribute a lot of money and you don't think they're going to use it all for college, you can also set aside that money if you're sending your child to private school, which is nice. So once the client has determined the vehicle, we can certainly help our clients allocate their funds. So many of these plans, and you kind of started talking about it, right? Is it, the limited investment plans with 529s versus just traditional investing in an UTMA? But a lot of them have age-based investment portfolio options, which start out more aggressive when kids are younger, and then they naturally become more conservative as kids near college age. I think that really helps, right? It helps you dollar cost average into these plans, just like we do for retirement savings. So you also kind of brought this up before, but let's dive in a little deeper. One of your kids decides not to go to college, or like you said, maybe they receive a ton of scholarships, so they're left sitting with a pot of money in a 529 plan. What can they do with those assets, and are there any penalties?
Like I mentioned earlier, you can change the beneficiary to another child that will use those funds, or you can convert it to a Roth. So you can create a child your child can create a Roth account, or if they already have a Roth account, you can contribute the annual max from the 529 to the Roth. So the annual max right now, I think, is $6,500 every year. And the maximum total amount of contributions you can do from a 529 to a Roth is $35,000. So it would take you about 6 years to get that full $35,000 if you do the $6,500 every single year. There are a couple caveats to that, though. The 529 needs to be owned for at least 15 years. if you plan to make a Roth contribution from the 529, and contributions made to the 529 in the last 5 years are ineligible for tax-free Roth contribution. So they need to be sitting, like the funds need to be sitting in there for at least 5 years before they can be contributed to the Roth.
Yeah, so lots of rules and workarounds, but it is a nice benefit that I believe came with the Secure Act. That if you do end up with a lot of extra money in a 529, at least there is a way, because there are penalties, right? So if you don't use it on school related items or services, and you just cash out a 529, you're paying taxes on the growth plus a penalty. So it's always great to talk with your advisor and just see if there are any strategies out there to help you continue to save that money tax-free or at least penalty-free. Lastly, let's talk about the FAFSA, because that's always a question. Whose income and what assets are included in the calculations?
So FAFSA, it stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's used by students, like undergraduate students or graduate students, to apply for grants, loans, scholarships, or other vehicles of financial aid. The calculation, so the financial need is going to equal the cost of the attendance for you to attend that school, and then you subtract the expected family contribution, or the EFC. So the EFC is based on your family's taxed and untaxed income, their assets, and benefits such as unemployment or Social Security. So all of those will factor into how much financial aid you will get from the government. It's also based on your family's size and the number of family members who plan to attend college during that year. So all of those will contribute to your FAFSA. Since 529s are not considered an asset of the child, a smaller portion of that will be counted towards your EFC. So that's just something to think about when you're thinking about between a 529 or an UTMA. Because an UTMA is considered an asset of the child, a larger portion of that will be included in the EFC. So it will decrease your amount of aid you'll get by a little bit more than a 529 would. And then lastly, a 529 owned by grandparents or family members, like anyone other than the parents, will not affect the amount of aid you get from your FAFSA. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's a new rule actually starting in 2024, which is, I think, a great benefit. So, before the asset itself was not considered, but any distributions from those 529s were considered. But starting in 2024, it's going to be completely excluded. So that's great. So lots of ideas, lots of opportunities, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. I look forward to seeing you next month.